Where it simply did not have the performance to climb. Just a few feet above the ground, the pilot turned to the right, back towards the runway. When it reached the runway, it was able to climb to about 45 feet, but stalled. With the rudder in the left position, the plane entered an unrecoverable spin, crashing into the ground and rolling onto its back.
Howdy, everyone. My name's Dave St. George. I'm the Executive Director of SAFE, and I'm glad you stopped in to see us tonight. I understand the Bills are playing the Ravens, is it? Baltimore Ravens. So you guys can text me what the score is because we're busy here learning about aviation. Anyway, the topic tonight is minimum controllable airspeed. We've been doing shows on expanding the envelope the last couple webinars, and those are all up in our YouTube, which is just youtube.com/safepilots. But tonight we're wandering into another area called minimum controllable airspeed. And that was gone from the flight training and testing for about 8 years. In 2016, the FAA issued a SAFO 16010. And I think Nick can stick a link up for that. But basically, it said you couldn't fly the plane in testing with the stall warner going. So what we've been doing for the last 8 years is flying above that speed, and it's not really challenging the students, and they kind of get this real fear of everything to the left of best glide, everything in the region of reverse command. And somebody can text me and tell me whether you guys saw the video that was playing in the, yes, somebody did text me and say it played. So you probably saw that F-16 trying to get airborne with 27,000 pounds of thrust, and it couldn't do that because it's just like a Cessna in a soft field takeoff. It's got that high angle of attack and so much induced drag that it really can't fly. And so I invited Juan Merkt because he's a lot more schooled in this with his Harvard PhD than I am. I always make mistakes. But the first thing I want to get you guys to do is enter a poll here. Let's see here, get the right one going, launch. And this should tell us what your experience levels are so we can kind of tailor our presentation. Thank you very much. And I'll let you know what I'm seeing there, Juan, so you know what your classroom looks like. And you can start sharing your screen if you want. Get that up on there while we're working this. Okay. So I'm seeing about 8% student pilots, 33% private, instrument about 30, commercial 25, CFIs about a third, multi-engine instructors 20, ATPs 17%, couple of DPEs on board, about half and half safe members and not safe members. And so the one that says no says not yet. I would invite everyone to join SAFE. We are an educational not-for-profit, basically a charity. It's tax deductible. If you give us more than your membership, you can actually write it off. But the big advantage is you get a third off ForeFlight. So as soon as you join, they will reset your anniversary date and you'll start getting a third off ForeFlight, which basically pays for your membership and supports programs like this. So Dr. Juan Merkt popped up on my radar when he, I think, wrote in the SAFE magazine way back in 2015. And then he wrote a couple of articles for AOPA, and he recently was one of the authors in the Airplane Flying Handbook, Chapter 4. And I wrote a blog today supporting that, but he's got a lot to talk about, and so we'll get him going. Make sure you guys use the chat for questions, and we'll try to field those as we go along. I'll be monitoring that. So, Dr. Merkt, the classroom is yours.
Well, David, Thank you very much. And I really want to thank SAFE and you personally for this amazing opportunity to do this. But anyways, let me go to my first slide here. A little bit of my background, I guess, if this works.
Nothing ever works once you go live. That's a rule.
So as some of you know, I'm actually at Embry-Riddle, Aeronautical University. I've been there since 2014. I'm an associate professor in the College of Aviation. And I think you mentioned that at some point in the past, I did go to Harvard. But the thing about this, I guess, experience is that my PhD was in biology. But the research location where I did my PhD was the Concord Field Station. And the focus of that research station was really the physics and physiology of the locomotion of animals and humans. They would put, animals or humans on treadmills or birds on wind tunnels to study their locomotion. What I did in my own research, actually, for my PhD was daily energy management in desert animals. So that's what I got interested in, energy management back then. Yeah. But anyway, soon after I finished my PhD, I pursued my lifelong dream of becoming a pilot and a flying instructor. And I got about 1,400 hours total time, 1,000 hours as flying instructor. But that's when I got interested in looking at energy management as a tool to enhance flight safety and efficiency too. So I wrote a few publications, as you can see here. I've given some presentations too, but the first one was in 2013. So it took me a while to start doing this. And as you mentioned before, I did write a little article for then the Safe Aviation Magazine Online in 2014. I wrote an article for flight training and also for the FAA Safety Briefing. And then the latest paper here, and J stands for the Journal of Aviation Technology and Engineering, and is published by Purdue University. Anyways, that paper makes the case for using energy management, and it lays out basically the rationale and the roadmap to integrate energy management into pilot training. Along the way here, I actually had this incredible opportunity, and I'm so thankful for Embry-Riddle, for the opportunity to design and teach my own course on energy management, and I've been doing that since 2018. And as you mentioned, at some point I got the opportunity to actually collaborate with the FAA and with other people and help writing Chapter 4, Energy Management. And by the way, the article in 2024, the last one that I mentioned on the list there, I think Nick is going to put the link to that paper. So if anybody is interested in reading it, please feel free. I do want to...
That is up in the chat now, Juan.
Great, thanks. And I do want to thank one person especially, Dave Cecil with the FAA, and he actually might be in the audience here. But Dave was an incredible support, both on the chapter and the Airplane Flying Handbook, but also he's a co-author in that latest paper that I mentioned there. Anyways, that's a little bit of my background. So what I'm going to do now is show you basically an outline of what we're going to be discussing. The first thing is going to be, kind of a definition of what MCA is, okay? Now, since energy management is so critical in performing this maneuver, I do want to go over some basics, as I call them. Now, in order to learn more about this maneuver, I'm actually going to be using an approach that I call the top-down approach to teaching principles of flight. But I'm going to contrast that first before I get into MCA. I'm going to contrast that with what I call the traditional bottom-up approach. Once I do that, then we'll go through the top-down approach for teaching the essential elements of MCA. Okay. So what is MCA? If you look at the Airplane Flying Handbook, actually the definition is right there in the glossary. An airspeed at which any increase in angle of attack or an increase in load factor or reduction in power would result in an immediate stall. And that really means that this is really I would say the slowest speed that we can fly without stalling the airplane, right? Now, as David already mentioned, MCA has been incorporated now into the CFI ACS. I'm going to show you here is basically just some of the key elements of the tasks in the ACS. Not everything, just the important things. As far as and you can see the reference, and I believe Nick has already posted that reference also on the chat. And the first thing is as far as knowledge, and again, it's one of the things, there's many things as part of the knowledge, but the important thing here is that the applicant needs to be able to demonstrate knowledge by describing and explaining the flight characteristics and the aerodynamics associated with this maneuver. Okay. Now, in terms of the skills, the applicant has demonstrated and obviously explain as is demonstrating the maneuver, how to conduct the maneuver both in clean configuration and landing configuration. Now, the reason I put the clean configuration in red is because I'm going to be focusing on the clean configuration MCA, just to keep it short, I guess. But now the key things here are that the airplane is going to start at some cruising speed, let's say maneuvering speed, and you're going to slow down the airplane and be able to maintain again that speed at which any further increase in angle of attack, increase in load factor, or reduction in power would result in an immediate stall. Now, if you look at the ACS, the FAA doesn't use the term MCAS or minimum controllable airspeed, but you can see that the definition matches exactly what's in the airplane handbook as far as MCA. So we know that's what they're talking about. And the airplane's going to go obviously beyond the stall warning indications. The pilot is supposed to acknowledge that. And then for the recovery, of coming out of the MCA, going back to cruise flight, you can see the last two statements there. So this is the first part here is the going to MCA and then coming from MCA. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus most of the presentation on how to transition to MCA. But at the end, I will say a few things about transitioning back or recovering, if you want, from MCA. Okay. So again, I want to go through some energy management basics here, because to me, energy management is essential to perform this maneuver safely and effectively. And energy management really is all about managing altitude and speed. Okay. And some of the basic, concepts that I want to cover are: what is the energy state of the airplane in terms of altitude and speed? What's an energy center approach to flight control? And once we do that, what is the energy role of the throttle and the elevator to manage altitude and speed? And finally, we're going to be able to put together just 3 simple rules for managing altitude and speed. So as you can see, everything is about altitude and speed. So let's start with the energy state. What is the energy state of an airplane? It's all about the total energy, the energy in altitude plus the energy in speed. Again, if we want to visualize the energy state of the airplane, the best thing we can do is actually show this energy state in a chart that actually shows you what the altitude and what the speed is. And by the way, I didn't come up with this idea. This actually goes back all the way to the 1960s. John Boyd, many of you may have heard of John Boyd. He actually developed the energy maneuverability theory to help fighter pilots do better in air combat. So it's all about air combat tactics. But to me, this is a great way to visualize the energy state of the airplane. So as you can see, I didn't put any numbers here, but you can see the airplane is maintaining a certain speed and flying at a certain altitude. Now, we can also use this energy map, as you can call it, to depict how the airplane can transition from one energy state to another one. And in this case, actually, you can see the airplane here actually trading speed for altitude or trading altitude for speed. And by the way, these lines that you see are what they call energy height lines, or basically the lines of energy exchange, if you want. So, and then you can see this envelope, if you want, that's the energy envelope that basically tells you how fast you can go, how slow you can go, and how high you can go. So all the flying you're going to be doing pretty much is going to be within that envelope, okay? Now, we can also, now in these two cases, actually, where the airplane is maintaining a constant altitude and speed, or as you trade altitude for the speed or vice versa, when you exchange energy, the total energy doesn't change, at least initially, okay? But we can also use the diagram to show how the airplane can transition from one energy state to one that, for example, requires more energy. In this case, you can see this airplane climbing to a new altitude at a constant airspeed. Or we can use this to also show the airplane accelerating at a constant altitude, okay? We could do the same thing to show an airplane descending at a constant speed or slowing down at a constant altitude. And by the way, MCA is going to be about this last diagram here, where you're going to be slowing down to almost stall speed, right? Now, again, to kind of summarize this, as I said before, in the first two examples, where the airplane is maintaining a constant altitude and speed, or when they were simply exchanging one for the other one, at least initially, the total energy does not change. The airplane has the same amount of total energy, right? Now, in the second, in the next two examples here, the airplane has to increase its total energy to either climb or accelerate, okay? Obviously, in this case, the airplane is increasing its total energy, and obviously, you know, we need to make sure that we transfer that energy either into altitude or speed, okay? Now, in the last two cases, the airplane is actually losing total energy. The total energy is decreasing when you descend at a constant speed or when you slow down at a constant altitude. But again, the question is, you know, how can you decrease the energy or transfer the energy out of altitude or out of speed in order to do this? So the two questions I have basically is, you know, what controls the airplane's total energy? And especially the change in total energy. And what controls the distribution of the airplane's energy over altitude and speed?
Hold that just for a second there, Juan. I just want to grab a couple of things here in the chat.
Okay.
Somebody's saying, what are lines of on the energy map, constant energy? So I think you define that.
Yeah.
That movement on the left one is constant energy.
Yeah. With this curved lines here are actually called energy height lines, and they actually represent the energy exchange trajectory. So when you're trading altitude for speed or speed for altitude, the airplane will actually follow that trajectory. And actually, you're not changing the total energy, you're simply exchanging energy. So you're going to be either losing altitude to gain speed, but the total energy stays the same, at least initially, or you're going to be, again, trading altitude to, trading speed to gain altitude, in which case you're going to be losing speed or gaining altitude. So the total energy stays the same. Again,
and then somebody asked, is the horizontal line, true airspeed or indicated airspeed? That's probably not really going to matter.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we should keep moving so we get through all this. I know you have
got the two questions here. So I'm actually going to now focus on what I call an energy center approach to flight control, okay? And the diagrams I just show you, okay, we're going to come back to those as we make the case here. But the point here is this: with an energy perspective, the apparent contradiction in the role of the controls can actually be resolved, okay? Making it easier for new pilots to master altitude and speed control. The problem of controlling altitude and speed then becomes, from an energy perspective, becomes one of handling the airplane's energy state. That's the amount and the distribution of total energy, right? So instead of asking what controls altitude and what controls airspeed, we should actually ask what controls the airplane's total energy and what controls the distribution over altitude and speed. And I know this might sound a little abstract right now, but let's put this in a way that we can visualize what's going on here. And what I'm going to do here is use an analogy. And this is, actually, I jumped too far. First of all, I'm going to show you what the role of the controls are, the primary role of the controls, okay? This is the throttle. The throttle, by changing thrust, is actually the total energy control. And the elevator, by changing pitch, is actually the energy distribution controller. Now, what I'm going to do now is kind of use an analogy, as I said before, to kind of show you exactly what is going on here, okay, with the throttle and the elevator. This is a reservoir analogy, okay? And as you can see, the airplane is going to gain energy that's coming from the engine in the form of thrust. The throttle controls thrust. And the airplane is going to lose energy through drag, okay? Now, obviously, if you increase the amount of thrust over drag, so if you add power, if you make thrust more than drag, you're going to have an excess amount of energy that is going to go into either speed or altitude. Now, which way is it going to go? That depends on the elevator, what the elevator is. So the elevator is going to be here to transfer that increase, that excess energy into either speed or altitude. Now, if you throttle down, so you make thrust less than drag, okay, the airplane is going to lose energy. That energy is going to have to come from speed or altitude. Now, which one? It depends, again, on what you do with the elevator. The elevator will dictate how the energy is going to be transferred out of the speed tank or the altitude tank in this case. Now, if you make thrust equal drag, if you balance both, the airplane, as you can see, is not going to gain or lose energy, but the elevator can still redistribute the energy in those tanks. That's when you exchange energy without changing the total energy. Okay. Now, one way that we can actually kind of make sense of this a little more without getting too much into math, but this is a very simple equation, I guess. It's an energy balance, okay? And it simply tells you that the difference between thrust and drag is going to determine a change in total energy. Again, if you make thrust more than drag, you have a positive excess amount of energy that can go into speed or altitude. If you have less thrust than drag, then that's going to be a deficit, and you're going to have to, the airplane's going to have to lose energy. Now, on the right side, you actually have the distribution of the change in energy. You know, the change in energy distribution in speed or altitude, okay? Now, the throttle controls the left side of the equation, and the elevator controls the right side, okay? So again, hopefully that starts to make sense.
And that's a good slide to take a screenshot of if you guys, because it makes sense. It puts the whole thing into context later.
Yeah.
I love that analogy, Juan. That's perfect.
Thanks. Now, one thing though is, and actually you asked me to put the slides that I'm going to be showing you now back. There is a little bit of confusion as to the role of the controls. I understand that, okay, but so I'm going to address that right now. There is actually a power pitch coupling that can lead to confusion, okay? And this is the problem here. And it actually has to do with the thrust line here and whether the thrust line is below the center of gravity of the airplane or whether it's above, and I'll show you that in a sec. But because of the thrust line in many airplanes, like the Cessna 172, is actually below the center of gravity. When you add power and you increase thrust, the nose is going to pitch up too. But what if you're flying an airplane like this, where the thrust line is actually above the CG? When you add power in this airplane, the nose is actually going to pitch down. So the point here is that, what is power doing and what is pitch doing? If you see both happening at the same time, we need to make sense out of that. And one way where you can actually, understand the independent role of the throttle in changing power and the elevator in changing pitch is by actually doing something that I've done in my class, and I've actually even tried it in the Cessna 172, and it seems to work pretty good. And that is to demonstrate the primary role of the throttle and the elevator, okay? But to do this, and you guys can try this, to do this, you have to make sure that obviously the airplane is maintaining a constant altitude and speed, you're trimmed, you're stable, right? And then we're going to do this. First, you might want to, change the throttle setting, but you're going to keep the pitch constant. That's the key. You might actually have to, if you add power, for example, you might have to push forward on the elevator just to keep the nose where it is. And with the elevator, we'll do this all the time, right? All we need to do is just change the pitch and keep the throttle constant. Okay, so see what happens. Let's look at the throttle first. When you change the throttle, okay, and keep the pitch constant, this is what you will see. When you add power, both altitude and airspeed increase. And when you reduce power, both altitude and airspeed decrease. Okay, now if you do the same with, now we do this for the elevator by changing the pitch without changing the throttle, we know this. You pitch up, altitude goes up, speed goes down. If you pitch down, altitude goes down, the speed goes up. In other words, you can see that the throttle there is there to change the airplane's total energy, but not the relative distribution. They both go up or down in the same direction. But when you do the same, when we do this with the elevator, the relative distribution is going to change. One goes up, the other one goes down, right? But the total energy, at least initially, as I said before, in the short term, actually stays the same. And actually, I've said that many times already about the short term when you change the pitch and you change the speed. What happens here is that when you change the speed, eventually drag is going to change. So that's going to affect the T minus D, the thrust minus drag, and you might actually increase or decrease the airplane's energy by changing the drag. Okay. All right. So again, this is one way that we can, we can actually demonstrate the independent role, if you want, the primary role of the throttle and the elevator. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the energy maps that I showed you before, the altitude and speed map, because I think those are really, really useful to really visualize the role of the controls, the primary role, and how you can integrate them to take that airplane from one energy state to another one. Okay. So again, that's our energy map, altitude and speed. You can see this line here is the line of constant total energy. Simply is the energy exchange line where you're trading altitude for speed, but the total energy is not going to change, at least initially. Okay. And that's the envelope, the energy envelope of the airplane. So that's your maximum speed, minimum speed, and maximum altitude. Anything in blue actually, oh, by the way, sorry, that little dot right there is the current energy state of your airplane, okay?
Hey, Juan, we had one
Yes.
question in the chat, what the dark line represents. That's just the limitations on the plane, correct?
That's just the limitations on the plane, the envelope, the energy envelope, yeah.
Well, the black one would be, stall on the left and VA on the right, or VNE on the right. It can't go faster.
Right, on the right would be your maximum cruising speed. On the left side, actually, stall speed may actually come before this dark line. This is this whole envelope here is based on on excess power, and excess power at this edge of the envelope is 0. So this is your maximum speed, that would be your minimum speed. And the same thing, that would be your maximum altitude that you can reach in this
Okay,
airplane.
thank you. That was just
But
a
anyways,
chat. Thanks.
so let's suppose that we're here where the yellow dot is. Anywhere above that in blue, as you can see here, is going to go anywhere here is going to require more energy, more total energy. And if you want to go anywhere in the kind of pinkish red zone here, that's going to require less total energy. Okay. Now, if you look at what the throttle and the elevator are going to be doing, this is the throttle. The throttle can increase total energy or decrease total energy. Okay, that's going to be changes in total energy due to the throttle. You add power or you reduce power. The elevator, on the other hand, is going to be along the energy exchange line. Okay, that's the elevator on both sides, as you can see here. And that's the change in distribution due to the elevator. Pitch up and pitch down. Okay. Now, so those are really the independent roles of the controls. Now we can put them together, and let's say that we want to climb at a constant speed. Now, as you can see, this is the energy trajectory of an airplane. Okay, this vector here is the energy trajectory of the airplane going from 1 to 2 is climbing at a constant airspeed. And I want you to pay attention here, because this vector here is defined by what's going on with the throttle right here on the right side and what's going on with the elevator here on the left side. The resultant vector really is the trajectory, energy trajectory of the airplane. So this is telling us if you want to go from 1 to 2, you need to add power and pitch up. And yes, I agree that in many airplanes, when you add power, the nose will pitch up too. But you can control that pitch as you want to maintain like whatever constant speed you want to maintain for the climb. Okay. Now, let's suppose that we want to go from 1 to 3, which is basically you want to speed up, you want to accelerate at a constant altitude. In this case, as you can see here, this vector here, trajectory, is between roll up and now pitch down. And in this case, obviously going to be gradually pitched down. Maybe you want to go to an energy state that requires less energy. You're going to reduce the throttle. In this case, you're going to descend at a constant speed. So this is telling us to reduce the power and pitch down. Again, most airplanes will do that, but you can actually, establish whatever pitch attitude you want to maintain a given speed as you descend. Now, let's suppose that we want to do this. I want to slow down at a constant altitude. Again, if you look at the trajectory here, it's between these two energy control arrows. This is telling us reduce your power and pitch up. In this case, gradually pitch up. Okay. Now, obviously, as we go through MCA, you're going to see this is going to be a little more complicated. Yes, we're going to reduce the power, but at some point, as you enter the backside of the power curve, we're going to have to do something different there. But anyways, I just wanted to show you, that you can actually use this energy map and to visualize both the role of the controls, the primary role of the controls, but also how you can use them to move from one energy state to another. I think we can actually put this together into these 3 simple rules, if you want, for controlling altitude and speed. Okay. Rule number 1, if you want to climb at a constant speed or accelerate at a constant altitude, you're going to need more total energy. So throttle up. If you want to go from 1 to 2, climb at a constant speed, you're going to pitch up. If you want to accelerate from 1 to 3 at a constant altitude, you're going to gradually pitch down. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, again, if you want to descend at a constant airspeed, or decelerate at a constant altitude, which requires less energy. And by the way, in 1 and 2, we're actually climbing at a constant speed, accelerating at a constant altitude, or descending at a constant speed, or decelerating at a constant altitude without exchanging energy. That's the key. So that's going to require more total energy or less energy in this case. You're going to throttle down, and 1 to 4, you're going to pitch down. 1 to 5, you're going to gradually pitch up. And the third rule is simply when you want to trade one for the other one. So 1 to 6, as you can see, if you look at the diagram here, we want to trade speed for altitude, okay? Or we want to trade altitude for speed. The throttle is not going to change. You're not going to change your throttle setting. You're going to keep it the same. And you pitch up, you pitch down. That's it. So those are the 3 simple rules, I guess, for controlling altitude and speed. Okay. All right. So with that, so that's the energy management basics, if you want. Some of the, the key concepts in terms of what's the energy state of the airplane, what's the role of the controls, and how we can put together, the role of controls to take the airplane to go from one energy state to another one. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you 2 approaches to teach principles of flight. As I said before, MCA is actually a great maneuver to not only describe how you control the airplane as you fly the maneuver, but also how to explain the underlying principles and also look at some of the safety risk factors involved. But again, there's 2 approaches here to teaching principles of flight. One is the bottom-up approach, and I call this the designer-oriented approach, again, an engineer approach. And let's say that you want to design a new airplane, you have to start by understanding the underlying principles, the air properties, the properties of the atmosphere, pressure, density, temperature, and so forth. Once you do that, you can, see what happens at the airflow level, right? As you are trying to design this airplane and come up with the right design, you can look at the forces. But the very end of the process, you're finally going to have a prototype that you can test, and you're going to be measuring the performance of this airplane and see how it flies. Okay, so that's the traditional, I guess, designer approach. But guess what? If you look at any book right now on aerodynamics or principles of flight for pilots, this is usually what you're going to see. Okay, in my view, I think it might be better off to start at the top. Okay, and this is my sort of a top-down pilot-oriented approach. Okay, you start at the energy level, looking at actually what you're doing, which is all about altitude and speed. This is the maneuver we're going to be flying. You can look at the power curves. Now, to understand what is going on here, we can drill down as needed to explain what is going on at the top level. We could keep drilling down to the airflow level and even down to the air properties. Today, actually, I'm going to be doing that, but I'm not going to go all the way to the properties. We're going to stop at the airflow level, as you will see. Okay. Now, again, the bottom-up approach has some problems, and I can understand. And David, you told me this before. Many instructors and pilots don't like aerodynamics, and I think part of the problem here is the way we teach it normally. The traditional.
Oh, I agree. As soon as you get the Greek letters out, people fall asleep.
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use another analogy here. Okay. Assume that I'm going to bring to you a puzzle. Okay. I'm going to throw the pieces of the puzzle on the table, but I'm not going to show you I'm not going to show you the picture on the box. I'm going to ask you to put the pieces together. Okay. That's a problem. Okay. Because it's going to be hard to connect the dots, to put the pieces of the puzzle together. You don't see what you're building here. You don't know the big picture yet. In fact, the big picture is going to be given to you at the very end of the book or the course. And the big picture in this case is performance, right? Okay. So on the other hand, using a top-down approach, I think this is some of the benefits that I can see. For one, I'm gonna show you the big picture. Look at that, that's a puzzle, okay? But you can see what the picture is, okay? That's what we're gonna be aiming to. But not only that, this big picture is gonna be given to you in the context of performing a specific maneuver, just like MCA, for example, okay? So as we drill down, the principles at each level are going to be introduced in relation in the context of the maneuver that we're performing. Okay, and I think it's going to be easier then to see how the pieces of the puzzle fit together, because the principles are going to be presented in an understandable, meaningful, and cohesive manner. Okay. So with that, let's use the top-down approach to teach the essential elements of MCA. Okay. So again, what I'm going to be doing here is show you, how we can use this top-down approach to understand the integrated role of the controls as we perform the maneuver. We're going to look at the underlying aerodynamic principles in the context of flying this maneuver. And finally, we're going to be even able to address some of the safety risks, I think, in a better way, in a more cohesive way, so that students can, anticipate some of the challenges they're going to encounter as they perform this critical maneuver or any other critical maneuver. Okay. Again, transitioning to, and that's what we're doing now. We're going to be looking at transitioning to MCA, to this minimum controllable airspeed. It really boils down again to slowing the airplane from cruising speed down to an airspeed just above stall, while we're maintaining a constant altitude, right? I'm going to be doing this again from the top down. Looking at the forces, I'm looking at the energy level first, the power curves, the altitude and speed, getting down to the forces, and finally down to the airflow level, okay? Now, at the energy level, this is where we are. Altitude and speed. That's why I find that energy map really useful, because this clearly shows you what we're doing as we perform this maneuver. See, you're going to start at some cruising airspeed here. You're going to slow down as you maintain altitude, right? Now, how do we do this, okay? And let's try to pretend that we're going to be flying the airplane right now, okay? So I'll pretend that you have one hand on the throttle, right hand on the throttle, left hand on the yoke, okay? So how do we do this? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reduce the power. I'm going to throttle down, okay, as we said before. As we were talking about the rules for managing energy here. So I'm going to be throttled down, and then I'm slowly and gradually I'm going to pitch up, right? Now, one thing that you might notice is if you pay attention to the airplane and to the instruments here, okay, if everything is going well, you're looking at the altimeter, you're maintaining a constant altitude, and now when you look at the speed, okay, initially what you might see is this. As you throttle down and you start to gradually pitch up, you're actually going to see the tape or the needle, I guess, move really fast. So the rate of deceleration initially is going to be pretty high. Okay, the airplane is going to be slowing down, okay, rapidly if you want. But then all of a sudden, the tape is going to start moving slower. The rate of deceleration is going to decrease. And then it's going to get to a point where the speed is almost not changing much. But then if you're not careful, all of a sudden, the speed is going to shut down and it's going to slow down really fast, almost out of control. Again, that can be really dangerous if you stall the airplane, obviously. So at some point, what we need to do is we need to start adding power as you continue to slow down. Now, to understand that, let's take a look at the power required curve, okay? And also the power applied here. So this is what we're doing in this maneuver. Initially, as you can see, we're reducing the power all the way down to whatever it might be, 1500 RPM and then 172. And you can see that the difference is huge here. since the power requires much more than the power applied, the airplane is going to slow down really fast, right? But as you can see, the difference gets smaller and smaller as you slow down. And it gets to a point where it's almost not there anymore. And that's what I was saying. The rate of deceleration decreases as you slow down. But as all of a sudden, the power required is going to increase. So at that point, we need to start increasing power here to kind of manage that increase in power required. And that's not, once we get to the target speed, you're going to make sure that your power is equal to the power required, and you're going to be able to maintain that speed. Okay. Now, as you can see here, we're actually adding power on the backside of the power curve, not to climb, not to accelerate, but just to manage the increase in power required so that it doesn't get out of hand. Okay. Now, question for you is this. Why does power required decreases on this side, this front side, and it increases on the back side? To understand that, we need to go down one level. We're going to go to the force level, okay? And this is what we see. This is the four forces of flight. And usually what we're told usually is, lift equals weight, thrust equals drag. Next. No, there's a lot more to the four forces to see how they interact as you're flying this maneuver. Again, here, we're actually starting at a cruise speed here. I'm going to slow down right to the left. And the first thing you're going to notice, and this is something you probably not going to see in any books really, lift, as you can see, the green line here is staying constant as you slow down. Why? Because to maintain altitude, lift has to balance the airplane's weight. Now, if the airplane weighs, let's say, 2,500 pounds at 100 knots, it's going to weigh 2,500 pounds at 40 knots. So you have to maintain the same amount of lift because the weight is not changed, right? So that's one thing here. The other thing that you see here is the total drag curve. As you can see, it's a U-shaped curve. That kind of explains, why the power curve is U-shaped as well. Okay, but the reason the drag curve is U-shaped is because there's two forms of drag. One is parasite drag, okay, that increases as you go faster or decreases as you slow down. And that's kind of the type of drag that we're all familiar with, right? You're driving your car, stick your arm out of the window. The faster you drive, the more cool you're going to feel on your arm. That's parasite drag, okay? But as you can see here, this explains why power required and total drag is decreasing on this side as you slow down, and why the difference between thrust and drag gets smaller and smaller as you slow down. But there's another type of drag, as you can see here, and that's induced drag. And induced drag actually increases as you slow down. Okay. So the big question there is, why does induced drag increases as you slow down? Well, believe it or not, that has to do with you trying to maintain lift constant as you slow down. Okay. So to understand that, why or how you can maintain a constant lift and why this induced drag increases, we need to go down to the airflow level. So let's do that. Now, at the airflow level, angle of attack is essential here. And again, I don't think you may have seen this in many books, okay? But this is really what happens as you slow the airplane down. As you can see here, you're going to have to increase the angle of attack gradually. And you can see the picture on the right here showing you what the angle of attack is. The angle between the wing and the airflow here, the airflow, it could be called the relative wind or the flight path, right? And as you can see here, as we slow down, we're increasing the angle of attack. The question is, why do we have to do that? Well, we have to do that to maintain lift constant because lift is a function of angle of attack and airspeed, and that's what you control. There's a few other things that are part of the lift equation, but those are the two important things there. So when the speed decreases, if you want to maintain the lift constant, you're going to have to increase the angle of attack. That's it. That explains why angle of attack increases. But what's the link between angle of attack and induced drag then? Let's take a look at that. If you look at the wing here, this is the airfoil here. And as you can see, the airplane, the wing here is flying at a certain angle of attack, right? The angle between the core line, the airfoil here, the line, and the flight path of the relative wind, right again. And as you can see, the wing is going to be producing an aerodynamic force. This aerodynamic force actually, that's the total force created by the wing. That force can be broken up into two components, okay? One component is lift, and that component of this force is actually always perpendicular to the flight path, the relative wind. But the other component is induced drag. So this actually arrow could be up here, and that's a little triangle. If anybody wants trigonometry, that's what we're talking about here. We're breaking up a force, a vector, into two components, lift and induced drag. In other words, induced drag is simply a consequence of producing lift. Okay? Now, if we increase the angle of attack, what you're going to see is this. The wing is going to be, flying at a high angle of attack, and therefore the aerodynamic force is going to be tilted backwards more. And if you look and see what happens, that's going to increase induced drag. So that explains why, as you increase the angle of attack, the induced drag, this backward force will increase. Okay.
This is a huge safety issue. This is the great mystery. People just, we always make this when a new student or a client comes in and, they think power makes speed, but, no amount of power is going to get you back flying when you're in the induced side of the power curve.
Right. Now, obviously, I want to get back to the previous diagram quickly here and obviously show this. As we slow down and increase the angle of attack, you got to be careful, obviously, because you're going to be, starting to get very close to the clear time of attack. Okay. But now that we understand that there's a direct link between angle of attack and induced drag, now we can see what is going on here. So, in other words, as you increase the angle of attack, as you slow down, in order to maintain lift constant, that's going to increase the induced drag. That explains the backside of the drag curve, and it also explains the backside of the power curve. Okay. So that's pretty much it in terms of, how you flying the maneuver and what's happening in terms of the underlying aerodynamic principles that explains exactly how you are controlling the airplane to maintain altitude as you slow down. So some of the key takeaways of all this, I guess, is changing in pitch and power are closely integrated during the transition to MCA, as you can see. The initial power reduction, making thrust less than drag, and the gradual increase in pitch, attitude, which gradually increase angle of attack, allows the airplane to slow down while maintaining altitude. To maintain altitude constant, the airplane has to maintain lift. It has to balance the airplane's weight. And since the weight is not changing, lift is going to be remain constant. So the key is, how do you maintain lift constant? You can be doing that by increasing gradually the angle of attack as the speed decreases. On the front side of the power curve, again, the airplane's rate of deceleration is going to decrease since there's a large reduction in total drag as the airplane slows down because power side drag is decreasing. Or on the backside, the drag is going to rapidly increase as the airplane continues to slow down. You must gradually increase power, not to climb or accelerate again, but to keep the thrust just below drag to avoid a rapid deceleration. Okay. Now, so hopefully now you have a better understanding of not just how you're controlling the airplane as you fly this maneuver and some of the underlying aerodynamic principles that kind of explain things better, but you can actually use this top-down approach also to examine some of the safety risk factors involved here. Okay, and there's three risk factors. One is energy mismanagement, obviously. The other one is poor angle of attack control. And the third one is actually degraded flying quality. And we may not have heard of this term, that often. Actually, this is used primarily by test pilots to simply, I guess, determine how difficult it is to control altitude and speed, to control the airplane under certain conditions. Okay, and they're saying here that flight quality is going to be great. So let's take a look at this. So again, using that top-down approach, we can see how the three things are in converge. Energy mismanagement is going to be critical. We're talking about, altitude and speed control. We're going to be slowing down. On the backside of the power curve, you got to be really careful. You have to increase power just enough as you continue to increase your pitch. There can be problems with altitude. If you pitch up too fast, too much, you're going to start getting altitude. If you don't pitch enough as you slow down, you must start descending. So altitude and speed control is going to be very important here. Okay. At the airflow level, obviously we have the angle of attack. And poor angle of attack can be an issue, actually, because you can stall the airplane. But what about this degraded flying qualities? Well, the key is that this degraded flying quality that actually affects the airplane's stability and control can affect the airplane at any of these levels. At the energy level, on the backside of the power curve, the airplane actually has speed and stability. Anything that slows the airplane down is going to slow it even more. Okay, so it's going to require really fine pitch and power coordination here. Now, at the force level, let's say that we're flying a Cessna 172 one propeller airplane here. This is actually the force and moments level, because we're talking not just about the forces, but how the airplane can rotate around the three axes. And things could happen here. And we might be, I'm sure you might be familiar with what can happen if you're flying really slow and you start adding a lot of power on the backside of the power curve. It could happen on go-arounds, for example. And we call this stability tendencies, for example, left turning tendencies, right? So the airplane might have a tendency to yaw to the left. For example, you're going to reduce roll and yaw stability. And in this case, as we said, in a single engine prop airplane, the airplane is going to have a tendency to yaw to the left. You're going to have to step on the right wire. So wait a minute, are you telling me that I have to have really fine pitch and power coordination, but now I have to step on the right rudder? How much? Whatever is required to maintain the airplane straight. Too much rudder, you're going to yaw to the right. Not enough, you're going to still yaw to the left. So just enough. So really, careful yaw control there is going to be important. At the airflow level, you're slowing down. The airflow is going to be slowing down over the controls. So the controls become ineffective. We have mushy controls. So we are going to have to be a little more aggressive if we want, okay, with the controls to make sure the airplane is going to be rotating around, pitching or yawing or whatever you're doing here, to make sure that you have the airplane where you want it to be. So you can see that this top-down approach, again, can help us to understand and to anticipate, okay, some of these challenges that we're going to encounter as we perform this maneuver. And it can help students, if they can anticipate these problems and understand what he's dealing with, it's going to be, or she's dealing with, it's going to be hopefully easier to mitigate those risks, right? So that's that. So what I'm going to do now, and we're getting down towards the end, I guess. Only 2 minutes over, David.
No, that's okay. We should just go to the safety aspects and wrap it up. I've got a lot of questions here. People are asking.
But anyways, I'm just briefly going to mention the transition from MCA back into cruising flight. And if you look at the ACS, the FAA is actually requiring that you don't change the power setting. You simply lower the pitch attitude and accelerate to a faster speed until you reestablish the airplane in level flight, noting the new airspeed and the amount of altitude lost, and then you can return that back to normal cruise flight at the altitude and heading specified by the evaluator. Now,
And let me just interject, and somewhere in the chat is Dr. Donna Wilt's explanation of this maneuver. She was
yes,
the one at SAFE who is in the ACS committee, and she was the one who had it put back in. And there's a Word doc, and Nick already loaded it a couple times into the chat, but that takes this apart and says exactly what, because a bunch of DPEs were all sitting at the booth at Oshkosh saying, what is this? How does this work?
right.
And so she sent a 2-page explanation, and I think it's a genius maneuver.
Yes.
But the important part is what Juan's going to talk about now is how do we accelerate out of it? So
yeah, and actually this brings up the what I call the second role of the again, the controls are going to be performing their primary roles, as I described before, fall for total energy and elevator for redistributing that change in total energy into either altitude or speed. But sometimes it's going to be useful to use the elevator in this way. And this is the second role of the elevator, and that is to indirectly decrease drag and T minus D. So what happens here, if you decrease the drag, you're actually going to increase the excess thrust that you have and the excess power, and that's important. How do we do this? By changing the speed, and that's drag through energy exchange. So it's an energy exchange maneuver if you want, okay? And we're going to be doing this actually either on the front or the back speed ends of the power curve. So let me just show you quickly here what I mean. So as you can see here, on the power curves here, power required and power available, you might be where the 0.3 is, okay, where the slowest speed that you can fly, which is where we are. And as you can see here, by exchanging, by trading altitude for speed, you can go from 3 to 4 by exchanging. This is the exchange line, remember? We're going to be losing some altitude, not much actually on this end. We're going to give up some altitude to gain speed, but by gaining speed, okay, you're not just gaining speed, but you're gaining power, excess thrust, which you can use now to, accelerate or to even climb if you want, okay? So this is basically the recovery maneuver as explained in the ACS. We're here, number one, and we're going to maintain the same power, but we're going to be able to accelerate to the speed. Number two, how we do that? Simply by exchanging altitude for speed, as you can see here. And once you get to a speed where you have, in this case, the maximum excess power here for that power applied that you have, which might be close to Vy, for example. Okay, at that point, you can actually climb. Okay, and once you reach your initial altitude, you can actually accelerate simply by pitching down and gradually pitching the airplane down as it goes to this point number 2, where you reach where power requires are going to be equal now to power applied. So as you can see, you can go from one side to the other of the power curve without changing power. Okay, so yeah. So some of the takeaways, I guess, as far as the recovery, if you want, or the transition from MCA. Okay, as we said, we're going to maintain constant power while pitching down. And I think this is Donna's contribution here. So this is a really safe strategy because it correlates better with stall avoidance and recovery. And this is something that we can teach students. If we're flying this maneuver and all of a sudden, for example, the airplane stalls, you're going to do this while you're going to pitch down. But again, what we normally do is simply explain the retort from the stall in terms of reducing the angle of attack. But in terms of energy management, you're actually not just reducing the angle of attack, you're increasing your speed, and that speed should be a target speed, the speed that is going to give you excess power. again, we're going to be doing this by using the elevator, the pitch to do this. And since the airplane is on the back side of the power curve, pitching down again is going to create a few feet of altitude, but not only you're getting speed, but you're also going to gain excess power in doing that. And once the airplane reaches a speed that provides a sufficient excess power, let's say VY, you can pitch up and begin altitude while maintaining a constant airspeed, and then you can actually pitch down once you reach the desired altitude, and gradually continue to decrease the pitch until the airplane accelerates while maintaining altitude until it reaches the steady speed. And that's pretty much it. Okay.
Well, thank you. I think we've escaped from minimum controllable airspeed.
Yeah.
But I have been through this now with you, Juan, like 3 times, and every time it gets more clear. And so I hope we'll have this up as a YouTube in a couple of days so everyone can go through it again. But just to, handle a few of these questions that came up, somebody wanted to see the 3 simple rules slide. And while you're doing that, I'll talk to a few of these questions. The big thing about understanding why did this come back into the CFI ACS is to understand that the FAA really does want every instructor to be able to demonstrate this to every pilot. It's not just for instructors. The fact that it's in the ACS means that every instructor has to train to proficiency in this, whether or not it's tested, and they should demonstrate it to pilots because it's a critical skill. I could just tell you I was taking off at a grass field with a private pilot person, and we would always train them on a real grass field, but there were wires at the end. And so, of course, he hauls the nose up really high to try to clear the wires. And to clear those wires, what we had to do was force the nose down, just like that picture you saw in the initial, where you were in the waiting room. We had to force the nose down, get some airspeed, get it to VY, and then it would climb over the wires. I actually have to put my foot up on the bar under the panel to get enough force. I thought, because once we were airborne, we were committed. We were either going to go under those wires. But until you understand induced drag, and every pilot has to understand induced drag. So, and Dr. Wishmeyer is on board. He's an MIT PhD in aerodynamics. And Dr. Ed, he wanted to know, he said, well, you didn't tell me what reverse command was. Well, the way I usually explain that is just to say it takes more power to fly slower, and it's counterintuitive for a lot of people. And if you subscribe to one of the dogmatic approaches to what controls what, then you get into this kind of enigma when it goes into induced drag, and you say, well, I can't power for airspeed anymore. When I go slower than minimum drag, everything changes and it reverses. Well, not really. If you understand the controls and energy management the way that Juan has explained it, there's no reversal, and physics doesn't suddenly flip over and change. It's all very consistent. What people don't understand is that phenomena of induced drag and how the vector is actually lifting backwards. There's a vector that's pulling us backwards. So here's that slide, the 3 simple rules somebody asked for.
Okay.
Somebody asked if this maneuver is flown with the stall warner going, and it absolutely is. That's the change that happened with this getting back into an ACS, is that, yes, we're flying with the stall warning, singing the whole time, just like we used to. And I've been examining as a DPE for 28 years now. So you can think about how long I've been teaching and how long since I've been flying. It's like you get to be an old guy. But yeah, the stall warner used to always be on in what we called slow flight. So that's back for the CFI for this maneuver. The problem with any dogmatic approach is that you do get yourself into a corner. If you fly pitch for airspeed, you're ultimately not going to kill yourself, and that's the naval aviator version. I think one of the best diagrams that I saw in the Airplane Flying Handbook that Juan had was the energy errors, and you didn't bring that along for this presentation. Yeah. When you're low and slow, I think that's a very powerful diagram
Yeah.
to show to a client because it's kind of simple version of what you have right there, that total energy.
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to make one point to CFIs on board. This top down versus bottom up,
Right.
which I think is genius, that puzzle with all the pieces in the box and no picture, is how some CFIs teach. They give you the little parts and they don't show you. We should always start, like Juan said, top down, start with the big picture and then break it up into pieces and move down a level if you need to, but start with the basics in the large picture. And Nick has put the email also in the chat, I see. And is everyone getting to that quiz okay? Dr. Donna Wilt's explanation. I think we've covered the bases. You're going to get, when we close this out, a survey, and that's also going to have the URL for that.
Yeah.
It has also got a question whether you want to, for the next webinar, go over this in question and answer form and take it apart, because we could do that. And so in the survey, tell me what you want to see in the next webinar. We're also going to put together a group of DPEs that's going to talk about the initial CFI. And I don't know if that would be more desirable for everybody.
Can I stop sharing my screen now, or you still want
Sure. Yeah, you can drop off that so we can be in our full beauty on the screen, right? I will compliment you. I think that is just the work of genius. And when I saw it in the Flying Handbook, I thought it was. And now that I understand it better, I like it more. So thank you very much for your work and your passion for this.
Well, thanks for the opportunity again. I mean, this has been an amazing opportunity for me to share my passion, if you want.
Oh, MCA and slow flight speed is really the only difference. And you'll notice, though, as Juan said, as you get into the reverse command with all that induced drag, that is also exponential and it increases quickly. And as he said, there's a lot of control instability, but it's a very good place to develop piloting skill in right rudder control. Okay, on the private pilot, this is, somebody asked this question. Slow flight is still without the horn going off. Private pilot, when you are flying that test, no horn. And they put this into the CFI ACS so a CFI could demonstrate it to a pilot, but it doesn't mean that's the way you're going to fly your slow flight maneuver. In other words, we demonstrate things that aren't on the test, and we teach to a standard that's higher than the test, hopefully. I think Donna Wilt's 2-page explanation. All I would say when I do an initial CFI is that we talk through it pretty extensively, so we both know exactly what we're looking for on the evaluation when we get in the plane. All right. Okay. Well, thank you all. And
thanks for the opportunity again. Thanks for being here. Thank you.
And join us on February 23rd at 8 p.m. Again, it's a Sunday night. Register by shooting this QR code. Our subject will be flight testing. We'll have some DPEs to discuss all flight tests, but specifically focusing on the initial CFI. Thank you for supporting SAFE, and fly safe out there.